In today's video, I'm going to show you how you can find your dream army in Warhammer 40k by following my 3 simple-step process that took me from having no army and being absolutely clueless to finding my dream army of orcs and playing tons and tons of games with them that has allowed me to enjoy Warhammer that much more. Now, look, there are just way too many armies in the game. When you look at the roster, there's just so many options to pick from. And when you look into each of those armies, there's so many different ways of building them and subsections and sub-factions. Not that they really matter in 10th anymore. But the point being is just there's way too many options for new players to choose from. And I remember when I was first looking into them, I was so confused and just overwhelmed by the amount of choice I had. And if I was making the right choice, like legally, by game standards. And that's what I'm here to solve. I'm here to make you a simple step guide that kind of runs you through the simple process of how you can choose the correct army on 40k without having to waste any time researching a bunch of armies just to find out that they had nothing to do with how you wanted to play the game. So I don't waste any more of your time. Let's just jump straight into it with how you can find your dream army in Warhammer 40k. Now, first step is going to be funneling. This is the very first core step that's going to allow you to kind of whittle down your options into a very select handful of armies to play. It's going to want you to whittle down your options to maybe 5 or 7 armies so that your options are still arrayed, but you're not overwhelmed by the amount of choice. I think the biggest problem with picking an army in Warhammer 40k is figuring out which one you actually find interesting, because there's just way too many options. And obviously they want to cater for as many playstyles as possible and want as many players buying as many models as possible at the end of the day. So they've got so many arrays of options, but with an array of options comes an array of difficulty choosing. So I think following the funnel tactic is going to allow you to kind of bring your army selection down from 28 or 29 or whatever the number is now to 5 or 7 armies that allows you to make the correct choice based off your decision. But how do we funnel? How do we funnel the correct way? Well, there's 2 ways of funneling that you want to follow, both indefinitely. The first one is the rule of cool, and the second one is the rule of tool. You cannot use one without the other, otherwise you'll be stumped and have the worst army selection possible. Many people say that all you need is the rule of cool, but I don't believe that. I believe you need the rule of cool and the rule of tool. The rule of cool and the rule of tool simply are just ways of choosing and following armies. At this point in the stage of picking an army, you don't really need to worry about the tactics and strategies and the specific enhancements that go on these specific characters that lead to this specific playstyle, this specific play in the game. All it is now is just simply the outside, the outer layer and the outer understanding of the army, which is going to allow you to funnel it down to the most armies, because overall, the niches that the armies are collected into are around 5 to 7 per niche. So doing this is going to allow you to limit it down to a great number. Now, the rule of cool is just the looks. This is probably the easiest way to go on. Go to your game store. Go online. Go look at an army. I've made full army guides on my channel that go through every single army in the game. Go look at those, or go look at another YouTuber. I don't really care. Just look at the armies and find one you look cool. What looked cool? Because at the end of the day, you're going to have to paint, play, and look at these models the entire time you're gaming. If you're looking at that thinking, wow, that's the ugliest little piece of trash I've ever seen in my life, you're going to have to live with that. I know so many YouTubers say it, but trust me, from a guy who's bought some of the models from so many different armies and found out he doesn't even like them, you need the rule of cool. The rule of cool is so crucially important. You need it, because if you without it, it just sucks horribly. But the rule of cool is useless without the rule of tool. The rule of tool is basic playstyle understanding. You can have the coolest models in the world, and this is where people get it wrong. You can have the coolest models in the world, but if you don't match to your playstyle, then they're pretty much useless. So the rule of tool is simply understanding what is the basic premise of this army, and does it suit with me? If you're looking to smash and trash a bunch of enemies and huge vehicle monsters in the games you play in Warhammer 40k, then picking an army that's solely based on defensive or shooting or little slight death by 1,000 cut attacks aren't going to be your model. You want these hard-hitting, slashy armies that are going to tear through anything that gets in its path. Or if you want to play a heavy shooting army, I don't think picking an army that looks cool but is solely dedicated to melee is what's going to be enjoying. After all, it's what you find cool, but also what you playing is cool. So use the rule of cool and the rule of tool. Like I said, rule of cool, what does it look like? Is it cool? Do I like the way it looks? The rule of tool being, hey, is the playstyle what it likes? And I've done so many videos on how to find army playstyles, and I've made plenty of videos that go over each army's playstyle in depth. So if you want to see those, you go check out other videos on my channel which have the full in depth. Or you can just go anywhere and find the playstyles. I don't really care, as long as you understand the premise of the looks and the playstyle. So this is step 1, funneling, getting your army down to as simple as possible so you can move on and start getting specific. The next step is the deep dive. Now this image right here, if you get it, give me a like. If you get this image, you're a G. If you get this image, put a comment. If you know what this image is, I'm just saying, this image Trust me. If you know, you know, you know. You know, you know. Now, once you get into your 5 to 7 armies, this is where you can go into a hectic autistic research stage. This is where you can start really locking in. Because if you just skip to this stage, the deep dive stage, with like all the 28 armies, you're going to burn yourself out from like having to understand all the rules, stratagems, enhancements. But this, when you have 5 to 7, is a lot easier to understand. It will take you from 5 weeks of research to a couple of days. So start researching these armies. Start really getting into it. And by nature of researching armies, you'll start whittling them down by nature. Because as you do more research, you might find like, ooh, this army works really well into this unit that I actually want to play this unit, but they work into this unit. I don't really like that anymore. Like, you might be looking at Necrons and like, oh, I don't really like the Catan. I really like the infantry-based units, the skirmishy units. So like, I don't really want to play Necrons anymore. I don't really like Catan, but it's heavy on Catan, so meh. Or you might go into other armies that work solely into a unit, or solely into a stratagem, or solely into a playstyle, and by doing research, you unravel the idea of the army, and suddenly you don't like it. So this kind of deep dive stage is pretty self-explanatory. Let's just do tons of research. Look into them, find out what you have, and based on that research, trust me, you'll start whittling them down. You don't really need any fancy steps, you don't need any fancy special abilities, or fancy, like, cool ways of researching. It's just meh. But if you want to see how to learn and properly learn an army at full extent in the quickest amount of time possible, I have a video which teaches you how to learn armies quick and fast, which I'll put in the link description along with all the army playstyles, also in the link description, so you have to go anywhere but my channel, basically just to understand that. Or don't watch my videos and go watch someone who's 10 times more qualified than I am. I don't really mind, as long as you understand how to learn armies successfully and how you just basically get the incorporation of what each army does. Now, after you've done this, like I said, you should be pretty much done. That's pretty simple like that. You should breed down to your 1 or 2 armies in the game that you want to collect, and you should have them. This pretty much sums it up. But if you still are on the little bit confusing side, you still have a bit of kerfuffle with what armies you want, and you aren't down to your 1 or 2 armies based off sole research, and there's one more step you can follow to kind of get your armies down to that definite 1 position and succeed successfully in choosing your army. Now, the last one's going to be the reverse benefits method. Now, this one is going to be different. You see, once you get down to that 3-4 army mark, it's most likely that you're going to be focusing on a very specific niche, whether that be fast attack, heavy attack, fast movement, slow movement, toughness, weakness, heavy shooting, heavy melee pressure armies, like things like that. You're going to be into a niche. Now, when you get that niche, most of the armies are going to give this same exact thing. If you're into a melee army, then most of them are going to have their strength is going to be like high melee pressure, and strats and enhancement that go along with that. If you're into shooting, the enhancements, stratagems, and the niche is going to go right into shooting. But the weakness is where you want to focus on, because it's all great and nice to have the strength. Oh, I like the strength of this army. But at the end of the day, if you can't deal with what the army is absolutely horrendous at dealing with, then man, you're going to suck hard. I'll give you a perfect example with orcs. When I was looking into orcs and world eaters and blood angels, because I was getting into like that melee niche, I was looking and I realized that all the weaknesses of world eater, all the weaknesses of blood angels, I couldn't deal with. I couldn't deal with the idea of balancing even some shooting with blood angels, and I couldn't deal with the idea of having absolutely no access to basic shooting with world eaters, or having to focus on being in the open and hiding my models because of my fast movement. But orcs had a very low AP count, and I thought, well, I can build my list around coping for AP. I can do that. I can do that very well. And I dealt with it very well. And I built lists around it and worked into benefiting the AP factor of orcs. Once you get into the idea of which army you can deal with a weakness best, you optimize your army completely. Because at the end of the day, the reason you pick in this niche of 3 to 4 armies is because you like the way they play and you're good at the way they play, most likely, or you just generally want to learn more or want to get better at the niche. But the weakness, you have to learn by yourself, or have to be ready to cope with by yourself. If your weakness, and their weakness is like, oh, this army is really bad at like deflecting massive anti-tank shots because it can't hide itself, well, and you're not really bad, you're going to be really bad at positioning your models in a way that's going to be able to take damage, but still be able to prepare, then you're going to suck with the army because you have no idea how to work with their greatest weakness. So, pick an army that you can suffer with their greatest weakness, and then you've got nothing to worry about. You've got the full army package. You can master the strength, but you can also obtain to the weaknesses and make them as little as possible. But that's going to be my full how to pick an army, dream army in a nutshell. This video wasn't very long because it's a very kind of simple topic, but if you choose it wrong, it can mess up your entire Warhammer 40k experience, or any Warhammer game experience overall. So picking the right army is crucial to understanding the full extent of how you can play in the game. So the 3 steps are funnel your armies through the rule of cool, the rule of tool. Second stage, obviously deep dive into armies and slowly whittle them down. And if you still haven't picked your army by then do the reserve benefits method, where you choose the negatives over the positives and slowly overall get a well-rounded army that suits you fully. So I'll link all my videos in the description, like the army playstyles, how to learn an army, and everything you might need to know about going fully into this about 40k. But hope you really enjoyed this video. Catch you in the next one. Do all the YouTube stuff, and see you soon.